Good evening and welcome. My name is Hannah, and this is Into the Hollow. On this show, I talk about cases and encounters involving the paranormal and the bizarre. If you have had any strange experiences or encounters with the unknown and would like to share, please contact me at intothehollow@protonmail.com. Zigmund Adamski was born in August 1923. In 1957, he married his wife Lottie, and the couple relocated to Tingley, a small town near Wakefield in Yorkshire, England. The next 20 years were uneventful, and the two became known as just another average couple around town. That was until June 6, 1980. This area had been experiencing strange UFO phenomenon and sightings around this time. Lights in the skies and missing cattle. Reports had come into local police stations of phantom helicopters, unexplainable lights, and silent aerial phenomena. This is what makes this case only that much more interesting. At 3:30 p.m., 55-year-old Adamski went off on a short walk to the local shops to purchase some groceries. It was a standard day, nothing outside the ordinary. Before heading down the street, Adamski was reported to have greeted a neighbor in his usual friendly fashion. This was the last time he was ever seen alive. It was far outside Adamski's character to go missing at all. His goddaughter's wedding was to take place the day after he went missing. Sadly, his body was discovered 5 days later, and 20 miles away in the town of Todmorden. His body was discovered by Trevor Parker, the son of the owner of a local coal yard. The discovery of his body was made on 3:45 on June 11th, 5 hours after the yard had been last used. Parker, the man who discovered Adamski's body, was at the yard between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. and didn't see anything unusual at the time. Parker said of the incident,
"I was loading my truck for the last delivery of the day. The body was just lying there in plain sight. I didn't know if the man was dead or alive. It gave me a terrible fright. So I called the police and ambulance. I didn't want to be out there by myself. I was scared, and the body gave me a very eerie feeling. I have no idea how the man got in the yard, but I can tell you one thing for absolute certain. There was no body on that coal pile when I loaded my truck earlier."
just after 4 p.m., Officer Alan Godfrey examined the body and assumed Adamski died of a heart attack. There were some issues with this assumption. Adamski's body was positioned face down on top of a 12-foot pile of coal. It appeared as though his body had been deposited from above, due to the lack of evidence of anyone climbing up or down the pile. There was no filth apparent on him or his clothes that would signify him sleeping in the streets. Adamski was not known to have any medical conditions. No hospital records were found, and he appeared to have been eating well. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene. The police described Adamski as looking peaceful, like,
"He just got into bed and was fast asleep."
Now, if you haven't heard of the missing 411 phenomenon, I greatly encourage you to research the matter, as there are some similarities between those cases and this one, in the way he was discovered and went missing, as well as the following. His shirt was missing. His watch and wallet were gone. His trousers and shoes were both put on his body crudely, as if by someone who didn't know how they were supposed to go on, and his coat was buttoned up the wrong way. Though missing for 5 days, he only had a single day's beard growth. Not only this, but burn marks were discovered around his neck and shoulders. The top layer of skin had been completely burned off. These burns were covered in a very strange, green-yellowy, gel-like substance that could not be identified. Lights had been seen in the skies from June 6th to June 11th, 1980, the exact dates of Adamski's disappearance. Godfrey said of the scene,
"It was quite obvious to me that this guy didn't die where he was found. He appeared to have been dressed after death. It was quite steep. I can't imagine anyone carrying a body up there. Why would they? It was very strange. 2 and 2 were making 5.
Another man with the same last name, George Adamski, was a UFO experiencer who wrote a series of books in the 1950s detailing his abduction by alien beings who took him on a tour of the solar system. It is interesting to note that a man with the same last name was murdered by potential extraterrestrials. The post-mortem examination was performed by Dr. Alan Edwards. He placed Adamski's death between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. on the day he was found, while noting that the burns were 2 days old. Due to the strangeness surrounding the case, cause of death was difficult to determine. Finally, it was ruled as a heart attack. Several months after the incident, the same police officer that was on the scene first, Officer Alan Godfrey, went to investigate another strange report. Cows had been reported going missing and disappearing from a local estate. At 5 a.m., while headed to the estate to investigate, Officer Godfrey saw what he first thought was the lights from an overturned bus. However, as he grew closer, he saw that it wasn't a bus at all. A rounded craft was hovering about 5 feet off the ground. Instead of getting out of his car for a better look, he instead sketched the craft from inside his patrol car. He drew a diamond-shaped craft with a rounded top that blocked the entire street. He noted the headlights of his car reflecting off of it, and leaves whirling beneath it. He attempted to radio in the sighting, however both his car radio and walkie-talkie failed. He said of the scene,
All the litter and twigs on the road ahead of me were blowing like a whirlwind. The swirling was very unusual. Higher up in the trees, nothing was moving, but lower down on the trees and bushes and the road and all this stuff was moving.
Officer Godfrey then blacked out after seeing a blinding white light. He woke up and found himself in his car, only further down the road from where he had initially been. His boots were split along the soles, suggesting he had been dragged. When he drove back down the road, there was no sign of the craft. The missing cows were later found behind a locked gate. However, there was no hoof prints to show how they had arrived there. Officer Godfrey agreed to go under hypnosis to try to discover what had happened when he blacked out. Under hypnosis, Alan recounted the story upon his approach to the object in the road. "It's a bus," he said, before correcting himself. "It's not a bus." He then goes on to describe a period of time when, after the flash of light he saw as he sketched in his notepad, he was floating in a room alongside a tall guy in a long white robe and skull cap. He goes on,
I then mentioned these little, I call them robots, about 8 of them, 3 foot high. I don't like them. For some reason they frighten me. The tall guy I called Joseph. Apparently they were doing some kind of examination on me. They attached something to my left leg and my right wrist. There was also a dog there too.
What Alan first recalled as little robots, he later detailed as
small creatures about the size of a 5-year-old's with heads shaped like a lamp.
The Sunday Mirror published an article that was filled with quotes from the coroner, explaining how confusing the Adamski case was, and even quoted him as saying,
I do admit that the failure of forensic scientists to identify the corrosive substance which caused Adamski's burns lends weight to the UFO theory.
Unfortunately, Officer Godfrey's career was ended due to press involvement that all but ruined him. This happens all too many times by professional people who come out with UFO sightings. This issue has led to a great deal of professionals to keep sightings to themselves and has definitely hindered the UFO investigation. A man murdered by aliens? Or do you think it was something else? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning about this case, and I want to thank you for journeying with me into the hollow. Until next time, good night.